What is going on, guys? So we are starting off the 700 wheel horsepower build on the Cobra. We're going to be starting it out with the fuel system here. So we're going to be installing the lethal 1400 rear wheel horsepower fuel system along with the fuel injector 1000cc injectors. And basically, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to make this video as a sort of guide for this fuel system in case you were trying to follow along on your car, so you can see exactly how we ran all the different lines and the regulator and everything. So I want that to be helpful. Now, it isn't a step-by-step, so if you don't know how to remove the fuel rails, you probably shouldn't be doing this. I like to make that clear on all these videos. I like to show certain technical steps, which can be confusing, but I'm not necessarily showing you step-by-step. The lethal Division X fuel rails do need to be notched for the VMP TVS blower that I do have, so I'll show you guys that as well. So this build series is going to be in multiple parts since we have various different steps of the build here, and it's going to be easy to kind of section these things off. So suspension, the fuel, the long tube headers, and then we have basically the Metco Motorsports, the 4-pound lower, the boost setup, and we also have a support brace for the tensioner. So for this build, we are doing it over here with Nick. So if you guys need anything at all installed on your Mustang or basically any other performance vehicle, or basically anything you need, hit up Nick. It's Florida Auto Surgeons. His link is down there in the description. He's over here in the Daytona Beach area. You can drive down to him. He can install basically anything from engine builds, superchargers, fuel systems. He actually really likes fuel systems, but anything really, and he has been a huge help with this build here, so definitely give him some love. Go like his page. He shows, you know, a lot of different things that he's doing, along with his Coyote Swap New Edge that he's doing over there with a turbo. Alright, so starting it out here with the fuel system, we have the Fuel Injector Clinic 1000cc injectors. We're going to be using these to make some power on the car. Over here we have our fuel lines, fuel rails, wiring, pump, regulator. We have all this stuff, and this is the 1400 rear wheel horsepower lethal fuel system. So the first step is I'm going to pull out the 40 amp fuel pump booster fuse, or basically the fuel fuse, and then I'm going to go ahead and start the car and let it stall out, basically trying to get all the fuel out of the system, or as much as we can as possible, so that we can go ahead and not have a big fuel mess when we go to take off fuel lines and rails and various different pieces. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start the car and let it stall out. And as you can see, the RPMs are going up and down. Unfortunately, audio failed on this clip, but basically you can see that we just let it basically run and let it stall out. And that's just going to take care of most of the fuel that are in the lines, so that we have a nice, easy system to work with. Now I'm going to start tearing apart the engine bay, take the cold air intake off, the throttle body, the elbow, basically get access to the stock fuel rails and get them off of the car. Now that the elbow, throttle body, and intake are off, we're going to go ahead and remove the stock fuel line off of the car so that we can go ahead and remove the rails next and get those prepped and test fitted on the car so we can see exactly where they hit. So we have the fuel line off, and I just want to point out one factor is that the Division X fuel rails are not designed for the VMP TVS blower, but we're going to be using them because based on the research online, they should fit with a little bit of shaving on some sides. So we are now prepping the fuel rail with the Fuel Injector Clinic 1000cc injectors. We are going to be running these in the Division X rails. We're going to prep these, put these together, and see exactly where they hit, and if we have to clearance things, we will go ahead and do so. So I want to talk briefly about the Fuel Injector Clinic 1000cc injectors. It is a little bit different than what everyone typically runs on these cars, and these injectors are supposed to be really good. They're a big recommendation from Bob Kurgan to go ahead and try these out. I got talking with the guys over there. They actually include the flow chart for this exact injector, not just the generic injector, but this one that's in the car. They also provide the tuning data, so it's plug and play for your tuner. So these injectors are definitely an awesome fit for the build. So the passenger side Division X rail fits with the TVS. However, we found out that the elbow actually hits it slightly, so we just had to shave the elbow on the TVS just down a little bit in order to be able to clear the rail on that back side. It was a very simple modification. Again, the Division X rails are not designed to work with the TVS. They work well with the Whipple, Eaton, Kenny Bell blowers. They just do not work well with the VMP TVS. But we definitely made them work, and I wanted to go with these rails for future plans, of course. So we started making a small grinding area on the backside of the fuel rail in order to be able to clear the bypass valve on the TVS blower. On other blowers, this is usually not an issue at all. However, with the TVS, the bypass valve sticks out a little bit, so we just clearanced it. So we're laying out the various different pieces for the fuel system. What I would like to show in this video is exactly where each individual piece goes, because sometimes it can be very confusing with all these different fittings. Alright, so we got the rails on the car. As you can see, the passenger side rail fits fine. We then have a fuel line that connects and goes around. Then that goes to the T-block, and then the T-block goes to the regulator. We also have our fuel rail pressure sensor that we attached on the rail. We are going to need to extend the plug for the fuel rail pressure sensor. It's actually a very easy process, and we've done it before on Turdzilla. Alright, so we are attaching the block to the regulator, and then the regulator attaches to the feed and return line, which go down beneath the car. The system, since this is a return style fuel system, you have one line that feeds, goes to the regulator. The regulator will then regulate the fuel pressure, and then it'll return back, basically bounce back through the rail based on the pressure that it sees that it wants, and then it returns the fuel that it does not need, and that goes back to the tank. With a returnless style system, which is like a stock system, this is not the case, and it just goes and feeds to the car and does not give more than what it needs. A return style fuel system is obviously beneficial because you can then get more fuel pressure and more consistent pressure, because you're always going to be at a consistent pressure.
Alright, we got the tank out. Here's the Cobra tank on the ground. Here's the new Division X hat here. Good picture of that. Little nice setup, twin hat. We got stock sending unit we're taking out. We're going to be installing it into the new hat. And this is my good friend Nick, my assistant today. His name is also Nick. So we're going to be knocking this thing out, get the tank back in, run some lines and a filter, and that will knock out the fuel system. Alright, we got the hat assembled, float unit attached, filters, pumps, everything's wired up, so we're going to drop it in. Alright, so one key point that I forgot to mention was you do have to make sure the depth of the pump via the bottom of the tank is correct. So when you put these in, you don't want them to be too high or too low. You know, you want them to be perfect. So we took it out a couple times, got it to the right spot, clamped everything down, and we're ready to go. So we're gonna drop this bad boy in. Alright, we got the hat in, wired up the sending unit, spliced into the old factory harness, the pressure sensor, and then this main plug will go into here. It will no longer control the pump, it will only do the sending unit and the pressure sensor. The pump, obviously, up into the car here has its own double relay system straight to the battery and a key power on.
Alright, so now it's time to wire in the trunk part of the fuel system. I'm going to be pulling out the fuel pump booster, and I got the instructions printed out there, so I'm going to figure out exactly what I need to do here and get this part wired in. Alright, so since the fuel pump booster already had the FPDM wire feed that I need to actually access already out, I basically just cut the fuel pump booster here, which this can still be used on another application, and here, and that wire is already exposed over there. It's the green and yellow wire right over there, and that's what I'm going to be wiring the lethal wiring into, which is actually fairly easy, which I have right here. Alright, so I got the fuel system pretty much wired. I also extended the fuel rail pressure sensor. This wire right here is the EGR. I want to just tuck that away. I don't like cutting things off the harness, but I may do that at some point. I ran the power wire that goes to the battery all the way up through the factory connection in the firewall, up through and then to the battery. So So that just runs down along, very similar way how you would run power wire for an amplifier and sound system, down through here, over there under the seat, and then it comes back over to here. And then this was also fairly simple. Since I already had the fuel pump booster, I just basically cut off the fuel pump driver module. So this is cut off, and that's the one that goes to the PCM, because the PCM is no longer necessarily controlling this. Then we have the wire there, and then this is the wire that runs through the car, and that'll all be covered up by the factory trunk panels. Alright, so I have the fuel system completely tight. I keyed on and we actually have fuel pressure. So I'm reading it off my SCT since the gauge didn't work. I just brought it down from 50 PSI, which I'm reading fuel rail pressure, and right now it's at about 47, 46. So I'm just going to turn down the regulator right here, tiny bit, try to achieve 45. There's 46, 45, and I'm going to try going a little bit less. And that's your base pressure. And that's 45. Let me try going a little bit more so I can get it kind of more flat. And looks like we got a leak there, so I'm gonna fix that. So I've pretty much been working all day trying to button up a bunch of little things on the car. The elbow wasn't fitting, so I actually ended up shaving one of the corners so that it fit the fuel rail on the TVS here. I'll pop it off to show you. So for some reason, I don't know if it's the injectors and rail combo, but basically it's at a little bit too high on that corner right there. So I just shaved it down so that it would fit, and now it fits without an issue. So I'm gonna finish buttoning this up, and then I might start the car open header, see what it does. All right, so that's about it here. We got pretty much everything buttoned up top. There is a slight fuel leak down towards the filter on the driver's side, so when it goes back on lift to get the headers and everything, the X-pipe and everything else back on, I'll go ahead and tighten those up, and then it's basically ready to start. I said base pressure, but obviously it's a fuel leak, can't really start it. So that's about it for today.